Okay, let's go ahead right now then. Good morning. This is Steve Wright, and welcome to the ICT Educator webinar series. This is a series that the ICT digital media sector team put together to offer. We used to do conferences, and we realized that we're out of the conference business right now. It costs so much money, it takes so much time, and you get maybe a smattering of people in different breakout sessions. We just decided we'd do every Friday 10 o'clock with conference quality presentations, so you don't have to leave or go anywhere. And so I'm real happy that you all chose to spend some time with us here this morning. All of our presentations, and we've had quite a few over the last year. We have a slide on that. Just in case you see a title here that's interested you, these are all on our website with complete video, which is chapterized so you can go to the part that you want. Also, there are complete transcripts of every single one of them, plus all the presentation slides that were given and links to other things of relevance to them. So we had some real winners back there. If you missed anything, you have an opportunity to go see that, as well as today's presentation, which is really a special treat for me. But let me see, just real quick. Next week is cloudification of the IT model curriculum. Everybody's heard about AWS, and we're going to be talking about their different capabilities. And then the Haiku Cyber Range for the cybersecurity training and competitions. And then we're going to be looking at CompTIA's Academy Partner Program. So all relevant topics for ICT professionals in the field. Next slide, please. And of course, today we're really fortunate to have Dr. Jamie Mulkey join us. I met Jamie when I spent a year on the IT Certification Council, learning what those people do. All the people that design and create and have supported IT certification testing since its inception. A lot of the founders are there, wonderful people. And I remember Jamie suggested to me I might want to go to the ATP conference, and I just happened to notice, and I put it in the links, innovationsintesting.org. They're going to be in San Diego 2020, I think it's March or something like that. If you have never gone to an ATP conference, it's a wonderful thing to understand how these tests are put together, what are the issues they go through, how do they deal with all these things from security to coming up with the right amount of rigor. It's just a fascinating experience. But Jamie knows all about all that stuff, and she also has been a leader in providing test security for many years. And we asked Jamie to take a look at our certification testing centers in the California Community College system. We were ready to do a survey. We wanted somebody who could reach out and talk to all of the folks in our community college system who responded to that survey, or most of them, a sampling. And give us some feedback on what are the issues, what are the pain points, what do we need to do better. And today to talk about that is Jamie. So I think I'll shift it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to come and speak with you today. As Steve mentioned, I'm going to be talking about a research study that I did for the ICT Council. And initially, when I started this project, we wanted to look at some different ways that campuses could offer industry third-party certification exams. And it really, through this research, kind of blossomed beyond that. So what I'll be talking about today is the research study itself, how it was set up, the results of both the qualitative and quantitative feedback that I received, and then some asks and ideas to have you think about. As Steve mentioned, I've been in the IT industry for a while. I started at Hewlett-Packard and actually managed 3 different technical certification programs there. So I'm very well connected in with this community, and I think that's what made it nice for this project, because I could reach out to some of my colleagues and say, hey, what do you think about this? And as Steve mentioned, the IT Certification Council, they had their half-yearly meeting in Austin last week. So I was actually able to present a portion of these results to them at their meeting. So the idea there being that I want to get them interested in this. I want them to think about community colleges as a mechanism for gaining more of those unattached workers and giving them some type of a credential that relates to their certification programs. So let me talk about the study and what it was designed to do. What we were looking for was documenting best practices, and that was looking at who were those campuses that were using or having third-party certification delivery capabilities on their campuses, who wasn't, why they were or why they weren't doing that. I was really looking at also how could this endeavor support the community college system in creating pathways to employment, particularly in the ICT and business information worker areas. The components of the study were both quantitative and qualitative, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And really, these results, I think, help to support efforts that the community colleges can move forward in adopting industry-based certification as a supplement, not a supplement, but as an add-on to showing success, to showing measurable success for ICT curriculum. So the bottom line up front, a couple of things I want to share with you is that for the folks that I spoke with and the feedback that we received is that community colleges do find value in offering some of these third-party certification that complement the course offerings. There needs to be a really strong instructor interest in combining these programs, in inserting third-party certifications either along with the curriculum, having it be some part of the curriculum. Another piece is that the price of the exams themselves. And this is something that I shared with the ITCC. These exams are expensive, and this population cannot afford these exams, and we need to figure out a way to make these exams cheaper and more affordable so that when students do complete their course of study, that it's easy for them and that the price of taking exams is not a barrier to completing their credential. I think one of the big ahas for me was looking at the size of these testing centers on campus. So these testing seats or centers range from 1 seat to 6 seats to 17 or 34 seats. And I think that's one of the messages that I want you to take away is that you don't have to have a full-blown testing center. It can be flexible depending on what your needs are for your environment. The last piece is that these credentials, these third-party certifications, really put a seal of approval on a student's study, things that they're studying. So more than just the course, this really becomes something that the industry recognizes, that employers recognize, and it really should be combined with courses that are being offered so that it's also an easy way for the community college system to measure student success. So just an overview of what the study was. First, there was a written survey that was sent out through Typeform, and this had, we wanted to kind of gather some quantitative information. The other thing we said was, hey, would you be willing to talk to me, to a person, Jamie, about your experiences, either positive or negative, about delivering third-party certification exams on campus. So we got 41 survey respondents. This is about a 13% response rate. I think the better part of this information, the richer part of this information is that I conducted 23 interviews, and these lasted anywhere between 15 minutes to maybe half an hour, and just discussing particular environments for different community colleges. So I spoke with deans, with instructors, with folks outside of the community college system, Certiport, as well as the Vice President of Certification Delivery, Krista Ketchmark, who kind of helped me understand the landscape of these different testing centers and what they look like. So here we go. Here was the kind of the quantitative study. So the first thing we asked was, how many of you are actually delivering third-party certification exams on campus? And you can see about a quarter of respondents said that they were. And then, what is your reason for administering these industry certs? And the largest proportion was that they wanted to validate student success. So again, it created this capstone for things that were being learned in the classroom. And then which of the programs are you delivering? Overwhelmingly, and these are kind of the de facto standards, is Cisco and CompTIA. the colleges and the folks that I spoke to really see these two certifications as kind of a baseline. It's what industry's asking for. And so you see a lot of that. And of course, the Microsoft MOS program, a little bit QuickBooks, some of these other industry certs as well. Now, the delivery of these exams are fairly low volume. So you can see that about the most that people were delivering were about 100 exams a year or fewer. And, you know, I think that's an opportunity to, you know, an area of opportunity to help increase these numbers and tying them with the classes. But I think the other thing to realize is that some of this also depends on the community. And so I'll talk a little bit about I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. And then we asked, well, what are the reasons that you're not administering? And there were a couple reasons here. One is that because of the volume, there's a small volume, it's really hard to keep a person trained and possibly certified to deliver these exams. So there's a lack of people that are, you know, the resources that are available to deliver, and it's hard to justify a resource if you're delivering low volume. Sometimes there was the cost of securing needed equipment. And I think one of the things I'll mention here is that probably the community college system is operating off of old knowledge about Pearson VUE testing centers. You know, it used to be that there were some heavier requirements in terms of testing centers and what you needed to have. What Krista mentioned to me is, you know, most of our centers are about 6 people, so they're small. And so they've gone to a much more flexible structure for being a testing center, particularly at a community college. So if you are a public center, you know, you're required to be open for certain hours and certain days. But at the community college, they're like, nope, flexibility. You know, whatever you guys want to do. And so I think that gives the colleges some flexibility themselves in considering putting a testing center on campus. And one of the things that's in the report itself is a breakdown of the requirement for a Pearson VUE testing center. So we talk about equipment. Well, you know, you don't have to get a palm vein scanner. You know, so the equipment itself is, yeah, you probably need a workstation. You need space to house that workstation. You're going to need someone to proctor the test itself, but not that much in terms of equipment is needed. You know, the likelihood is, if some of these barriers were removed, would you consider delivering third-party certification exams? And yeah, we got good response on that. Yes, they would. They would consider it. So thought that was good news. And if you were going to consider delivering exams, which one would you deliver? And this is part of the message that I delivered to the ITCC. Is like, look, you know, there's some opportunities for certifications other than Cisco and CompTIA to be delivered at your testing center. And once you are, let's say, for example, a Pearson VUE testing center, you can deliver any exams. So you have some flexibility as well there. One of the things that I shared with the ITCC is that, you know, you may have different pockets or different areas within the US where your products are primarily used. So the example I gave was like cybersecurity. You know, maybe if your community college is near a military base, there may be a high need to have folks who are trained in cybersecurity. So be thinking, you know, my message to them is, so be thinking about that. It's like, where can you start up some of these programs, and can you have some centers of excellence where you could, you know, approach certain community colleges about, hey, you know, we really think this is needed here. Can you partner with us?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
I entered something in chat, but maybe it wasn't visible. This is Michelle Gray in San Diego. I was wondering, you mentioned in one of your slides, it says remote proctoring. What does that refer to? What does that mean?
So that is kind of I'll say a relatively new method for delivering exams. As I mentioned in the beginning, we were looking at, hey, can we bring testing centers to community colleges? But the other piece in this is that many of these IT certification programs are now moving to remote proctoring. This means that a student, a candidate who's taking an exam could take it from their home or anywhere where there is a quiet environment, and the proctor is actually online. So they're being monitored online. So it's not necessarily that they could, but that they're taking it at the community college, but at a quiet place of their choosing where they can be monitored.
And so there's a camera that can see kind of a peripheral view of this tester to see that they're in the room by themselves and no one is helping them with it. They can't, is that how?
Exactly. Yes, so the camera is typically on the computer screen. It's the camera that's on the laptop. And I don't know the exact protocols that they go through, but these proctors that are online, they ask the test taker to do a sweep of the room. They make sure there's no notes on the wall. They make sure there's no people in the room. So they're really checking the surroundings, and then they're monitoring them online as they take the test. A proctor may hear like voices, like whispering going on. And so they may stop the test and go, is there somebody else in the room with you? Or, they could stop the test and go, sounds like, something else is going on there. So they may give them a warning and then let them proceed. But yeah, so that's what that is.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's go to the next set of slides here. And these are talking about just the feedback that I received from the interviews that I did have. And I tried to group these into different topic areas. And the first one was certification exams. Some of the folks felt that the exams were encouraged, to take those certification exams, those third-party exams. They were encouraged by some of the instructors that teach ICT classes. And in some cases, they were actually used as a final exam or a capstone to the class. So you actually passed the class if you were successful in taking the exam. In other situations, like Sierra College, for example, the class is given and then there's 12 non-credit hours that are dedicated to preparing the student to take the CompTIA test. So it's getting that student ready and then taking that so that they can get that credential. As I mentioned earlier, Cisco and CompTIA really look to be the de facto standards for IT certification. Adobe, MOS are really essential for the business information worker. And in some colleges, students are purchasing their own exams. As I mentioned, these tests are really expensive, and it's really a heavy burden on students. I'm going to talk about some of the solutions for that in a few slides. So sometimes exams can get paid for through special funding, but it's just a matter of where you find that funding. So as I mentioned, in terms of testing spaces, there's really some different options here that colleges were using. Some of the testing centers were like one person. They had one person, one carrel or one seat for testing. And then they had a person that would proctor like on an ad hoc basis as it was needed. Some of them had as much as 6 spaces, and that space may be dual use. So sometimes it was used as a community room for sharing, doing group work, and then sometimes it would be used for testing. Probably the largest test center I saw was at College of the Canyons down in Santa Clarita. And so they actually have like 2 17-seat testing rooms. And I think it's important to mention here that they are, not just testing ICT exams, but they're testing all exams. So it could be automotive, it could be dental assisting, some of the medical assistant exams, anything that like a Prometric or a Pearson or a PSI, and those are all testing vendors, might deliver, are delivered through those centers. So that was their way of getting their return on investment by opening, making sure that they were covering anything and advertising that they were delivering all of these different type of exams to justify having these testing centers as part of it's housed within their learning center. Some other solutions is that there may be just public testing centers nearby. So it may be that the college refers the students to say, hey, there's a testing center right down the road in Sacramento that you can go to finish out your CompT exam. But I guess my message here is that although we're focused on these different options, there really are options beyond that. And as Michelle just mentioned, there's also the option to take exams remotely. I know some programs like Adobe, for example, with their technical certification, they are moving to the capability to offer the student or the test taker an option to take it in a brick and mortar test center, a PSI brick and mortar, or they can take it remotely. I think AWS is already there, and also I think Microsoft is already there. So, and those are for their technical exams. So proctoring. Proctoring resources are limited. And as I mentioned, it's hard to justify having a person full-time if you're not delivering that many tests. So, sometimes these resources are part-time, and it may be a heavy requirement to have this person recertified each year as a proctor if the volume of testing is low. So the message there is, what can we do to get this volume up so that there is justification for a resource for proctoring? Vouchers, here's the big one. Again, some of the colleges offer vouchers with their courseware, but many do not. And they can be difficult to disseminate, the vouchers to go take tests. Sometimes vouchers have expiration dates. I mentioned the funding issue. This is huge. And some of the colleges have been using like Perkins Grant or strong workforce dollars, but again, it's limited because they expire. I also spoke with somebody who was using financial aid to use for low-income students and allowing them to use those monies to go take a test. The good news is I've been talking to the folks at XVoucher, and the new CEO, Kevin Bryce, I just got an email from him this morning. He's like, we're willing to work with the colleges. If we can get more colleges on board, we can help lower the price of these vouchers. And the great thing about XVoucher is that it gives you a universal voucher. And so whether you get a voucher for a Pearson VUE test center or a PSI test center, that can be treated as a single voucher. It doesn't matter where you use that voucher. The other thing I'd spoken to Kevin about a few weeks back was this thing called XWallet. And I said, is there a way where they could put money in and kind of have that money held there, and then when they need the money, go use it to go pay for vouchers? He said, absolutely. So XWallet actually allows you to do that. So if you had dollars that had to be spent by the end of the year, you could throw them onto the XVoucher system in XWallet, so that maybe you have students at the end of the class, and then you've got some dollars there to go purchase vouchers that you can give to them to go take the test, take that certification exam. So those discussions with XVoucher are going to be ongoing. We want to try to, between Steve and Nicole and I and the XVoucher folks, do some brainstorming about how we can work together to help increase the use of X-Voucher and providing vouchers to students, because we know that this is a burdensome cost. I think the other piece to consider is this whole idea of course and certification alignment. And there was really a mixture of things that programs, ICT programs, were doing at the community colleges in regards to this. And I mentioned a little bit of this earlier. So, you know, some campuses will use materials straight from the IT certification vendor. You know, some of those materials are available, right? You can purchase, or you can get training materials from a Microsoft or an AWS, and then be able to teach from that. Other campuses, they said, you know what, we've got our curriculum, but we could also be looking at the blueprint, you know, what are those skills that these students need according to the certification exam, and let's make sure that we cover them, you know, in our courseware so that the student can be prepared. In other instances, there could be a commingling of course content that is delivered through the community college in combination with the training materials that come from the vendor. So there are, you know, a lot of different options here, a lot of different things that people are using, instructors are using to deliver. Another piece of feedback, I think, is that that there is greater, that the instructors found there is greater student learning when there's both a combination of face-to-face and online instruction.
Excuse me, Jamie, this is Steve, right? I'm just going to say that last point. I mean, with the whole advent of everything being online, including all kinds of courses you can take, you know, we're continually asking ourselves, what is the sweet spot for community colleges? Why would somebody drive and come to a campus and sit in a classroom? And I think that observation there, the face-to-face is still a critical part of learning for a lot of people. And it's a combination. They can do more online than they did before, but for some people, that's a critical thing. Glad you shared that.
Yeah. Okay, here is, I think, another piece of this ecosystem that really needs to be considered. And this is some of the feedback that we got back, is that some of these instructors are not comfortable teaching the materials, and they may not tend to recommend certification. So they're not keeping up on technology. And this is really critical, particularly in this field. Everything is changing all the time. You know, the IT certification programs struggle themselves with keeping content up to date and keeping exams up to date because technology just changes so quickly. Some of the instructors feel that the exams may be weighted against their teaching. So again, I think, you know, we have to communicate that, or find ways to communicate that their efforts support students to become credentialed. It can be hard to find instructors that do teach the newer technologies, and we really need to create some incentives to get instructors to learn and keep current. It might even be thinking about requiring teachers to get their certifications, their third-party certifications, so that they can, you know, talk to students and give them an overview of kind of what to expect on the tests. Another thing to consider is practice testing. So a lot of these IT certification programs do have practice tests that instructors can guide their students towards. And I think that's important as somebody who's developed tests for a couple of reasons. It helps get test takers familiar with the content and the styles of the test and the items prior to them going to take the test. So it hopefully should relieve some anxiety about what to expect. And as I mentioned before, Sierra College is doing this 12-hour prep for no credit to get students ready. So that, I think that could also be another way of helping students get prepared to take the test. I will put a note in here. I'm also, I work for a test security company. So I want to make sure that if we do point students towards practice tests, that they are authorized test prep materials, and because we want to make sure that we don't send students to brain dump sites where, you know, these tests have been stolen. A lot of times the answers are wrong, but really pointing them towards authorized test prep materials. So just some other ideas to consider, looking at cohort support. College of the Canyons does that, and looking at bringing groups together to help them prepare to take the test. Looking at mentoring, and this is something that I mentioned at the ITCC meeting, which is, hey, could you get some of your SMEs, some of your folks who are already certified, to be working with the community colleges so that they can go in there and work with them, help them prepare to take the test, give them some real world experiences, and give these subject matter experts, these folks who are already certified by the IT company, maybe they get some points or something like that towards keeping their credential. Practice assessments, which I just mentioned. And then I think, you know, some word of mouth too. A lot of the colleges get out to the community. They meet with, you know, they have advisory panels that they talk to, letting them know that, and maybe this could be part of a larger communications plan, that that these courses and these to support these third-party certifications are available at the community college. So this kind of dovetails out to like community outreach, marketing, communications. As I mentioned, there's industry advisory boards that meet on a regular basis, and that there's also articulation to the local high schools for specific courses. So I think those were some really good best practices that I heard about that some of the colleges were doing. Outreaching to local businesses. You know, I spoke to somebody in Stockton, and he said, you know, everybody has a need for IT, an IT technician. Every business. It doesn't need to be specialized or a certain type of business. And so making connections out with local businesses to find out where those opportunities are, where these graduates could go and obtain employment. I guess another one I'll mention is just using strong workforce dollars to send counselors out to the field to do presentations to high school students. So these are just some different ideas based on the feedback that came back. I thought were interesting things to consider. So now some asks and ideas. Looking at an ROI model for program viability, and this ties into the third-party certification delivery to see if it works for a particular college, and looking at what it would take to create a self-funded model for the campus in delivering these exams. Possibly looking at the foundation, the College Buys program, to purchase vouchers from them. Maybe they could kind of be a central point. Although I think if we can talk to XVoucher, we can probably come up with some ideas there and working with them directly. Maybe there's ideas for regional testing centers. So not every campus has a testing center, but each of the regions could try to fund a testing center, possibly using strong workforce dollars. And also finding funding for licensing third-party certification course materials. Maybe that can come out of strong workforce dollars. Being able to successfully being able to report successful certification completion. I know one of the colleges I spoke to, College of the Redwoods, and when someone finishes their Cisco certification, their name goes up on a plaque in their, department. So looking at ways to share success. And possibly forming a club to get students interested in technology, bringing in industry speakers. Again, some of these folks that are connected with the specific IT certification programs, that could be a great way to get folks who are already certified, who are already working in the field, to get people interested and excited. These are just some other ideas that that you can take a look at. One of the things that I'll mention, and I have the URL in the written paper itself, is that a friend of mine runs the community college testing system for the College of DuPage near Chicago. And so one time he sent a note out to all the folks he knew and said, hey, share with me your strangest, strange but true test proctoring stories. And so he put it into a book, and it's published, but I've actually given you the URL so that people can look at it. And this could be particularly interesting for the folks who are proctoring, because there are some stories in there that they're kind of astonishing, of the things that people will do to try to get away and cheat on a test. And so to be aware of those things, I think, can help folks who are proctoring. Another thing to look at is, where does digital badging fit into this? And can we weave a compelling story around badging for both students and faculty? This is another area that IT programs are really considering and figuring out how to put together a badging program. So when someone successfully completes a certification, they can get a badge. It's something they can put on their LinkedIn profile. They're looking at different levels of badging. So can you get a badge for what they might call a professional test, which is not quite a certification, but something a little bit lower level, but yet they get recognized for having certain skills. So again, it's being able to communicate those skills and capabilities that you have. So I think that would be an interesting proposition to kind of tie that into this whole thing that we're looking at. If the group wanted to move forward with this, looking at running open monthly meetings, webinar meetings, to discuss best practices on how to tie in all these components. And then if there is like an in-person meeting, for folks to be able to share best practices together. So I talked about the bottom line up front. This is the bottom line from behind. There are some different options for taking third-party certification exams. I talked about on-site within IC classrooms or buildings, the larger testing centers, local testing centers, as well as remote testing. And I think the compelling story here is that that these programs, the ICT programs, need to really gain some agreement around using third-party certification as a means to document and show student success, and use it as a capstone to courseware that they're teaching. So with that, I will, well, I have one more slide, and this is really to say thank you. I really appreciate all the folks that I spoke with. Your collective wisdom was really helpful in really weaving this story together and being able to present to this group today. With that, I'll open up for questions or comments.
Well, Jamie, thank you. First thing I want to say is I hope you all realize that one of the special advantages of having Jamie come in and do this research, talking to all the community colleges, is she's really not that familiar with how community colleges function. And so that's the wonderful thing, is we got a fresh look. And sometimes we hear these things over and over again, but we dismiss them because we've heard them before. But when someone from the outside who's familiar with the industry and understands all the parameters of what works and doesn't work, hears us for the first time, they hear it in a different lens and or see it in a different lens. So I really appreciate this. And Jamie, some very good observations. I know I started off when you started the work with certain preconceived notions where we might be going, and the evidence and the talking to people revealed a slightly different path. I love those 4 options for the testing centers and identifying the key problems, such as the cost of the tests and the need for vouchers, as being some of the breakthrough things that we need to do. And I see that there's some questions here. I think Richard Golson's question about making student test results data available to the colleges is something that's been pursued a long time with certification companies and everything else. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, is it's still, I think you used the word self-disclosing. The only thing we can do is somehow figure out a congratulatory way of getting students to share their success, so we can count it indirectly that way. You have any other thoughts on that, Jamie?
Yeah. So yeah, I think, you know, I might call it making hay out of it. So this idea of, hey, we want to, you know, we've got a plaque, we want to put your name on the plaque. Or so, as you said, getting them to self-disclose. You know, it will show up like probably on their LinkedIn profile if they have that. A lot of these programs, you know, if you want to check to see if somebody's certified, you can go in and do that. But you know, that takes work on your part to go figure out versus having that information come back from them. Yeah, it is. I think it's a privacy issue. You've got to get them to disclose.
I see another question here about the industry certification count in the new funding formula. I've read that new funding formula through and through, and there is no place where they specify that third-party certifications are included. They use the word certification. So I think it's a bit of an open issue. I think the way it's written, it's intended to mean the certifications that our colleges give. But obviously in areas like ICT or IT, the certifications that really count are the third-party certification. So we'll continue to lobby for that to be considered. Until then, we all know it's beneficial to students anyhow. So it's like, well, whether it counts or not, I think we need to do it. 26 people on the call right here. You know, one of the questions I have for you, and I can answer it in the chat or speak up, is would you like to see an organization moving forward that aligns all the people that do certification testing in the community colleges, maybe have a meeting? I don't think it'd be technically a user group, but some sort of group that helps share best practices and advances some of these things. I mean, if you're interested in that, let us know. But we think that's the logical next step, is that we begin to not be divided so much and begin to come together and solve some of these problems. The 3 ways your colleges can offer certs. Basically, I think the second to last slide, Jamie, I don't know if you can back up or not, but there's actually 4 relatively relevant techniques: small, large, outside local testing centers, and remote testing. I think the remote one is evolving. It could be one that solves that problem with a proctor. I'm not sure. Jamie, do you have any idea of what the cost structure is for remote testing where there's a proctor online? I mean, would that be included in the voucher? I mean, in the cost?
It's included. Yeah, it's absolutely included. So you're not going to need anyone to proctor on site. And the pricing is the same. They don't charge you any more, any less for taking your test remotely versus a testing center or, you know, in a testing environment.
That's great. I was impressed, and I mentioned in the beginning the ATP conference that will be in San Diego next year. I put the link at the very beginning. It's a wonderful place to learn about the background of all these things, and some of the advances in testing. It's not just questions in a lot of cases. Sometimes there's simulations and scenarios, and they really need to make sure the person on the other end is the person who's supposed to be taking the test. So they have very sneaky ways of doing that, and so they can't really divulge it all. But the sophistication of not only the tests themselves, but the technology to determine that the person really is the person it's supposed to be are really advancing. And so I think we're going to see a lot of wonderful developments here.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing things like facial recognition now, and they're checking your ID against the picture, the person that's testing it. It's really, they're going beyond, just a thumbprint or a vein scan. It's pretty remarkable, even to the point where there are different levels of remote proctoring, and some of the lower levels where they don't have a live proctor, they may observe something with their recording that looks like somebody was doing something they weren't supposed to. So when the recording comes back, they say, hey, get to this number. We think the student may have, or we think the test taker maybe have tried to go to a URL outside of the testing environment. So this AI, it's like you said, Steve, it's really advancing. They're using a lot of AI to just enhance being able to effectively monitor test takers.
So what I'm hearing is that in the future, where we're going is testing may not be so much a center. The center could be advantageous for the cohort and support and the face-to-face encouragement, but the actual testing could occur in a lot of different locations.
Yeah, definitely. You know, IT is always at the forefront of trying new things, particularly from a testing perspective. And so, you know, more and more of these programs are moving towards that and at least giving candidates a choice right now of, you know, where they can test. There are some smaller ones that they've just gone directly to remote testing. So SailPoint, for example, or Okta, you have to take your exam in a remote environment.
Okay. I see a lot
just
of questions here. Go ahead.
I was going to say, just ATT, it's going to be at the end of March this year. It will be in San Diego, as Steve mentioned. And if any of you can go, it's a little, if you're going to be there, let me know. And if you want to talk to anybody from the IT certification programs, I can help set that up. I'll facilitate that. The other thing that I will mention, I was in Washington, D.C. earlier this week, and so I got to meet with the Assistant Executive Director of WorkCred. And these guys are looking to put together a global skills directory and tying certification to those skills so that when employers look for skills, they could say, oh, this person has this is what I'm looking for, and this person has these skills. This person matches with that. But one of the things that Karen Elsey shared with me is that the discussions that we're having here about integrating certification, third-party certification with curriculum are conversations that she's starting to have with some of the universities. And even as little as a few years ago, the universities didn't care, man. They were on their own path. But now they're starting to have an interest in trying to figure out how they can integrate some of this stuff. So I feel like there's this harmonic convergence of curriculum and credentials, obtaining credentials.
There's another question here from Steve Major. Is there a process document for setting up a test center? Now, I believe that'd be rather detailed. It might vary by campus. But Jamie, did anyone share with you anything like that? And or at the same time, those of you who are on the call, do you have something like that that you could share?
One of the things that we have in the actual written report, and Steve, I'm not sure if that was that already sent out?
We'll attach it to the website so that
okay.
Anybody who attended can see that, or anybody who wants to come in later. Yes, we'll have one.
So what's in that report is the requirements for the different levels of testing centers. You know, I can certainly get you in contact with the right person. And actually, it's probably out on the Pearson VUE website. You know, are you interested in becoming a testing center? And I'll probably walk you through the process.
That's right. So in that case, Pearson would have their own step-by-step process, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Well, this is a beginning discussion, I think, on this. Since I've been with the system for about 8 years now, I've marveled, because I work on a statewide basis with a lot of colleges. I've been marveling at the different ways every college does things. And I just figured it was time to start putting a little cohesion around this certification testing center concept. And thank you, Jamie, for working with us for the last, I think it's been about 4 or 5 months now, and digging into this. And course, anybody who can navigate our invoice and PO process, it's hats off to you. But actually figuring out how, and then contacting everybody, because, you know, it's not the same person in every college. That's why we took the approach we did with just a survey. And, you know, we probably missed some centers, but we got a bunch. And I think we got a pretty good feedback to start the discussion. So I think what Nicole and I will probably take as a next step is we have all your emails. We know who you are. We'll let you know when the webinar is posted, and which will be usually within a week, with the chapter breakdowns and the transcript and the slides available, and any other links that we've discussed here on the call will be there. And then we might invite you all to join in a dialogue about testing centers, sharing information, frequently asked questions, that sort of thing. And if anybody here has an inclination to want to lead a statewide effort to harmonize our efforts on testing centers, please let Nicole and I know, because we can look for funds and we can try to make that worth your while. And I think it's a need that's just perpetual. And I'm glad we've opened the discussion here. And I thank you, Jamie, for very significant work and letting us know where we stand and what some of the options are. Any last questions from anybody? Once again, thank you, Jamie, and thank you all for attending. Next week, we're going to have an exciting webinar about AWS and the IT model curriculum. You don't want to miss that one. Everybody's buzzing about that topic. And that's all for today. Thank you very much.